Episode 100, the time travel episode. Welcome to the Visionary Variety Podcast, where we cover cool stuff like photo, video, film, books, and technology. So switch on your brain and enjoy the show. Welcome, podcast listeners. I am Gabriel Grove, your host for this episode. We've also got on the show our friend Joshua Howell.
Hello, or is it goodbye?
Oh, and my brother Gabriel Grove.
Hey, what's going on?
This is one of the episodes that I wrote on our idea list before the podcast was ever born, like 2 years ago. I wrote down all the crazy ideas in my head, and time travel was one of the earliest ones. I was like, we got to do justice to this, classic story plot, sci-fi theme, cliche, whatever you want to call it, of time travel. And here we are, episode 100, kind of timely. Get it?
Yeah.
And honestly, I didn't have any big, grand ideas of what to do for our 100th episode. Like, I couldn't come up with anything, but this just kind of fit. I was like, you know what? I'm kind of cool with this. This fits. So here we are. So first of all, Happy New Year's, everybody listening, and you guys here.
Yay.
Woot.
Wee. Nothing really special happened here, except for a whole bunch of illegal fireworks, typical.
Yeah. It is Texas.
They don't like rules here, especially when it inhibits their fun. Now, 2020, for some reason, just has me thinking of the year 2000, which we all know is Y2K. If you're like a clueless hipster that's below maybe the age of 25, you may not even know what Y2K is. God bless your little heart. But Google it.
Baby. Babies.
No, little baby. But for you guys, where were each of y'all at Y2K, and what do you remember from that time, that epic era of the catastrophe?
So I was actually living just up the road from y'all down in San Antonio. I was living in San Marcos, and I remember my mom absolutely panicking because she bought into the media hype of the computers are going to reset themselves and society's going to fall apart, and so we hit Sam's Club and bought cases of water, cases of canned vegetables and non-perishable items, and man, I think for 3 years afterwards, we were still using some of the canned vegetables that we had bought.
That's
but,
awesome.
I'm sitting there in my room going, Mom, you're crazy. And she's like, no, I'm being prepared. I'm like, no,
You never know.
you're being crazy.
No, really, you're being crazy.
So I was a senior in high school, and I went, no, I take that back. I was a freshman in college, and just watching my mom lose her mind.
Oh, yeah, a lot of people lost their mind. Just the what if factor
really
of not
did.
knowing, not being a computer expert. They didn't know what would happen.
Yep.
Gabe, what about you, Gabe? What do you remember from our childhood?
For some reason, you asked this question on Facebook, and I said all I remember is Mom and Dad buying a bunch of toilet paper, and my mom replied and said, "No, we didn't. We didn't do anything." So dang it, I thought it was a lot more fun in my house, but apparently we're really boring, and I don't know. So nothing happened, apparently. I don't remember anything. I remember my friends thinking it was kind of like, we don't really know. We don't know what this means, because at the time, I don't remember I graduated in 2003. So I was in middle school. I was homeschooled. Yeah, so my friends were thinking this is kind of weird, kind of watching our parents go crazy over it. And apparently not my parents, because they're boring.
They were or level-headed or that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember much. I remember we were at our neighbor's house just next door at the Terry's house, and what was I, maybe like 10 or 11? I was 12, and I thought that the future would happen. Like 2000 was the heralding year of futureness of everything, cars. And yeah, I mean, everything would be what I always wanted to be from all these sci-fis and cartoons I always watched as a kid. I was waiting for these things to happen, and they hadn't happened yet. So hey, 2000, here's your chance, future. Here we go. And nothing happened. Very disappointing. I'd love to write or read a story about an alternate history where the Y2K really did wipe out civilization. That'd be cool.
Oh,
that would be interesting.
At that point, all computers like became sentient together or something. That'd be awesome. I'm sure it's out there.
Well, that's how Skynet was.
If it weren't for all those programmers and overtime hours, we would have had Skynet. All right, well, let's get into our episode about time travel. So I found an interesting idea that I hadn't thought about before, which is, when did time travel originate? like story-wise? When did
Oh, yeah.
stories begin having time travel? Because I've always felt like it's a very modern new science fiction idea. And I was mostly right. I can't give an exact date, or I can't uh, authoritatively say, "Oh, this is the first time travel story," written down. You can find some early ones. One of them was by Mark Twain, interestingly enough. I think it was about a technician who goes back to King Arthur's court, basically sets himself up as like a god or a prophet because he knows steam power, he knows, medicine,
Oh,
things
yeah.
like that. But yeah, so it is a newer idea. And what I learned about it was that the idea of thinking of the future from a current, present standpoint, where you are now, thinking about the far future, say 100 years from now or 500 years from now, we see it as, oh yeah, the world's going to be a totally different place, right? Technology, society, morals, ethics, space travel, you name it. It's all going to be so different than it is today in just about 50 years. But if we go back to the 1500s or the 17 or the 1800s, when they looked into the future, what did they see? They didn't really know any better to see the world as any different than it had already been, because the world had slowed down mostly for about 1500 years of progress. There wasn't a whole lot of changes until the Industrial Revolution happened. That's when people started saying, "Whoa, things are changing. So what is it going to be like next year, or in a decade or a century?" And that's when the idea of time travel, I think, may have been born. Because at that point, when human society was finally moving forward with technology and ethics and morals and things like that, like, then the future was a thing. There wasn't much of a future to even imagine before that time. Yeah, so that's kind of the mindset behind the early origins of time travel stories, which we have written by, like I said, Mark Twain. He wrote Yankee and King Arthur's Court, and then of course H.G. Wells with The Time Machine. Huge stories. I can't imagine what it was like for those people that time to read that story. That must have been like mind blowing,
Yeah, really. So far ahead.
Yeah, traveling and adventure, of course, is an exciting thing. Like there's been books about adventure and epic journeys and things like that around the traveling geographically, but traveling through time, whoa, that must have just blown their mind. And I love time travel stories because they explore, a place that you can't reach with your feet or with a vehicle. They explore different times in the future or in the past. And there's all kinds of strange little things that happen when you go back or forward in time. And we're going to explore those later with time travel paradoxes, as well as different types of time travel. Well, we'll get to those theories in a little bit. Here's something that's interesting. Albert Einstein was 10 years after H.G. Wells. Isn't that crazy?
Oh.
Einstein being the heavy hitter when it comes to understanding time and space and the relationship between the two with his theory of relativity, that was also changing the game with time. People were thinking, well, how can we not just travel through, space as in like X and Y coordinates or XYZ, but like, how can we travel on another dimension, the fourth dimension of time, and go somewhere else, not somewhere, but somewhere else. And elsewhen, I think I've heard it in some other stories.
Elsewhen.
I love when it's such a cliche in a time travel story.
No, don't say
you
it.
know what's gonna happen. They pop into somewhere else, and they say, "Where are we?" And is not where, when. I'm like, oh, I saw that coming from a mile away. It happens in every time travel story almost, especially when there's kids involved. All right, so let's talk about the three basic types of time travel. These are the three kind of fundamental, theories. And I'd love for you guys to chime in. And, if you guys think of any movie example or TV show example that just pops in your head, just jump on in and say that. So the first type of time travel, I call it the single universe, or you can also call it the static universe, which means you cannot change time. If you go back in time and you think you've changed something, it'll actually repair itself somehow, or it'll prevent you from changing it.
Yeah.
So it's a single universe with self-repairing history. Any changes you make in the past will be undone, or what you've done was already part of history. That's weird. So let's say you try to go back and stop the shooter that killed JFK in Dallas, right? You find the guy in the tower, you sneak up behind him, and you jump on him to stop him. Well, you scare him, and he pulls the trigger and kills JFK.
Yeah.
Or somehow you slip and pull the trigger, and now you're the killer. So yeah, any change that you try to do will either be undone or it's already been written in history. You just didn't know it, and now you know that you were always part of history, and that's a time loop.
Well, that sounds like H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. He tries to go back
Hmm.
Hmm.
And he figures out he
Exactly.
can't fix it, so he just moves on and goes to the future.
Yeah, the drive behind the time machine, the guy who makes it, which I believe is never named in the book. It's so weird. I don't know how you
Yeah,
get through a whole book without a name, but the technician, the creator, whatever, I think he's called the time traveler. He's trying to save his fiance, and because
yeah,
she gets killed, like either a mugging or something like that, so he
yeah.
goes
First,
back like a year, or no, he goes back like a month or something, and tries to save her over and over. And every time he approaches her to stop her from being killed, something blocks him or something stops him, or it's
she
weird.
dies
It's just
another
like,
way.
yeah, she goes dies in a different way. And I feel like that's kind of cool because
Yeah,
it's like if you stop your loved one from being killed, you've just deleted the prime cause that caused you to go back in time in the first place.
yeah,
Like if you kill Hitler, Hitler never did the bad thing. So why would you need to go back in the past if he was killed?
yeah. Like,
They actually touch on that a little bit on the in the TV show Timeless, where one of the characters,
Hmm.
Wyatt, he's like Army Ranger, like super soldier basically, and they
Nice.
recruit him to be the enforcer. They know that they have to go back in time, they have to stop somebody, and he's going to be the one that actually pulls the trigger. But his
Hmm.
goal really is to ultimately prevent the death of his wife. And
Like secretly, that's his
yeah, so
agenda, or
secretly that's his driving factor.
uh,
And so throughout, I think it's the first season and maybe even a little bit into the second season, spoilers, he
mhm.
comes close to preventing it.
Oh,
And she ends up dying in different ways until
it's terrible.
at one point, I think in the second season, he does actually prevent it, and it throws
Hmm.
everything off because he
Oh,
just prevented his wife's death. And so, just like you
that's
said,
cool.
there would be no reason for him to go back. And by preventing
mhm.
her death, she actually became a bad guy. And
Oh,
and so
cool.
yeah, so it's
Then he has to kill her?
I don't remember if he kills her, but I'm trying to remember. I believe
That would be dark.
she does die in the show if I remember right. But anyway, so yeah, so it is that
Yeah.
paradox of he tries to prevent her death on multiple occasions and she still dies.
Well, here's a weird question. If you do change the past, what happens to your memories of the past that is now altered? Do your memories suddenly pop into a new existence of my wife never died? Or do you retain your old memories of a different universe?
Or
Weird
or
stuff.
do you remember both?
Oh yeah, that would be
Mm,
confusing. Like a weird deja vu, which that's an awesome movie by the way,
yeah,
Deja Vu. Definitely check it
Yep.
out. Oh, and another example of this type of time travel is seen in the Harry Potter the Prisoner of Azkaban, where they go
yeah.
back in time and they see themselves, but they don't interact with themselves, but you find out that Harry is the one that saved himself all along. So, in quote unquote present time, he thought that his dad was appearing and in spirit form saving him, but it was actually himself saving himself, his future self saving his past self. And it's a loop. It always will happen that way. It'll always keep repeating that way. But that's kind of an instance where there's one universe and you can't truly change history. Second type is single universe again, but you can change history. So you can change the past, but it will affect you in some way. One of the examples is Back to the Future.
Yeah.
So, for example, if his parents don't hook up, he'll never be born, and that does happen. It starts to happen in the movie, and what happens to him? He starts to disappear.
I like that.
um,
The photos start changing.
yeah, the photos
Mhm.
are changing. The history is being rewritten because of him, and his siblings disappear, and then he's next. I guess because he's the youngest. I
Yeah,
think maybe that's I don't know.
he's the youngest,
Yeah.
and his mom falls in love with
Mm.
him and thinks his name is Calvin Klein.
Oh,
Yeah, because of underwear.
Yeah.
I like when he shows up in that hazmat suit and he pretends to be Darth Vader.
To scare his own
That's
father.
funny.
Turns the music on, the rock music.
Yeah, devil music. Another example is Looper.
Yeah,
In this movie, your memory and your physical, like even your body, can be changed by changing the past. So at one point, I think young Bruce Willis has to send a message to old Bruce Willis, and he cuts a message into his arm,
yeah.
Mhm.
and it appears as a scar in his older self, and he can read it, even though they're not like anywhere near each other. Even in time, I think they're separated, but he can see these scars in his hand, and it's something I forgot what it was. So that's pretty trippy. So you're rewriting, your physical body. If you trip in the past and break your leg, suddenly future self has, memory
Got a limp.
or a broken leg. Yeah, I got a limp. So in this type of time travel story, you are able to go back to the past and fix things, quote unquote, fix things. Now, the after effects is, what is the real problem now is, what ramifications will happen throughout history, not just immediately, but echoing throughout time, even to where you came from, which is your present, because of your change, because of your quote unquote fix. It may actually make things worse. It may, alter things that altered someone's lives, that they didn't marry this person, they didn't have a general in the army that won the war, and now we're Russians. We just don't know.
Well, yeah,
I'll speak in German.
Yeah, you don't want Biff Tannen to kill your dad and then marry your mom and start some weird casino. So
hate when that happens. Ugh. In X-Men Days of Future Past, we see a really interesting, what I think is a new spin on time travel, which is instead of physically traveling back to the past and running into your duplicate self or your younger self, you're actually sending your consciousness, your mind, and your memories back into your younger self. So Wolverine does this. I think it's explained that he's the only one with the body that can handle that kind of overriding of his brain cells or something crazy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So one of the X-Men has the power to do that. Is that how it works?
That's the one thing I don't like, because the same character, Kat, she's the one that walks through walls, but now all of a sudden she can send consciousnesses back in the past.
How useful is that ability if only Wolverine can end up doing it and live? How does she
can
figure
send
this
her
out?
own. Maybe she can send her own on Will, and then she tried it on somebody else. But that really ruined like the whole movie. Like this character, the same actress was Kat in the past X-Men 1, 2, 3,
Mm-hmm.
and she could walk through walls. And now all of a sudden, she has this different power.
In your brain,
really. I don't know. Unless that's like an advancement of her.
She's evolving,
phasing and sending kind of power. I don't know.
Yeah, I think they explained it some weird way. It was an evolution of her ability, but mixed with Professor Xavier's power. Also, like it was this weird combination, and Wolverine was the only one that could do it because of his healing factor. And so
I love it for what it does in the story. It's so cool that he's going back into his younger self. Travelers on Netflix does this, and I love that show. Have y'all seen Travelers?
I have not.
Oh my gosh, you got to binge it. It is so good. The character development is awesome. The story that they set up is really cool. So what happens in that show is future time agents send their consciousness back into other people's brains right before they are recorded to have died in the past. So, so-and-so's going to die of a brain aneurysm, or it's going to get hit by a car, or is going to have a heart attack. And so they send their mind back into this person's brain just before it happens, and they prevent the death. And they're kind of keeping the timeline intact because that person would have died. But now they're them. And it's cool because they still have to deal with that person's life. They know what they've done. They know their memories, and they are still in, say, the family. One guy's a drug addict. One girl is sent back into a woman's body who is in an abusive relationship.
She fights back.
Yeah, she does. Awesome. That poor guy didn't know it was coming. One of the doctors, she's like a brain doctor. She sends her mind back into someone who's mentally handicapped.
Interesting.
So time travel of the mind is kind of a subversion of this second time travel theory, which is you still got one universe, but you can change the past. The third and final type of time travel is branching universes, or the many worlds theory, as it's also called. So in this type of time travel, or understanding of the universe, if you go back and change something, which you can change whatever you want, you're not hindered or stopped. You've just now created a branch universe with that change applied to it. So when and if, the big question is if you return to your original present time, nothing's changed because you didn't change your past. You created a new future that's changed. Now, I don't know how you could, make sure you're returning to your past, or your present versus the altered present. That's where things might get cool in a story. I don't know if that's been dealt with. Yeah, am I making sense? You guys following this? Kind of a spaghetti bowl.
It's almost a little bit like, again, Back to the Future 2, where Marty changes a timeline and goes back to his future in 1985. And Biff Tannen has killed his father. He's married his mom, and it's this weird, awful alternate reality where he has to go back. He goes back to right before his alternate self goes back to 1985, and he's like, "We have to change the The future has changed and we have to fix it.
So from an outside observer, it looks like the Mandalorian, the DeLorean disappears.
Yes.
And then it comes back.
Well, yeah.
And a whole movie happened in the middle.
Yes.
I love it. So you got to time your entrances and exits of timelines based on previous trips, which I think is genius.
Yes.
You don't want to overlap. Like, what would happen if you met yourself? That would screw up everything. You might even just go mentally insane or die or disappear. I don't even know.
Oh, I mean, you could destroy the universe.
Yeah.
Or that.
Or that. Bing, everything's off.
Yeah. Something small.
Everything just goes black. Yeah, so in this third branching universes theory, any change you make in the past will make a new branching timeline. Now, if you return to your present, like I said earlier, the butterfly effect will not apply because you have not changed your history's past. You've made a new history branch that's doing its own thing. And I think and there's sort of a sub-theory that kind of ties in with quantum physics, which says that there is an infinite number of universes already existing, literally infinite. There's no, you can't count them. There's no end to the number. And what are in each of these universes? Any change possibly imaginable. Like there could be one universe, quote unquote, next to ours, where the only difference was one electron went left versus our universe went right. Like that's the only change. There's a whole other universe just for that. Then there's a second universe, or a third rather, where the universe went left and then right, and ours went right and then it stayed right. Just every change, and of course moving up in scale to personal decisions, history, natural disaster, whatever. All the changes that could ever branch from any quantum particle size difference in the universe. There's that many universes, and that just blows my mind.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Being able to travel or somehow pick which universe you go to, that's pretty cool. I don't know how that would even be done with technology because there's an infinite number. I guess you just flip a coin and, boom. Oh, we're in what? Let's learn what's different in this universe because there's no way of knowing until you get there. One of my favorite book series called the Long Earth series takes a similar approach to this where there's, I guess there's infinite numbers of Earths that you can jump to. And they use the term left and right. So you can jump left Earth, to the left, Earth 1, or to the right, Earth 1 or 2, whatever, up to infinity. And each Earth has taken a different course in history. Pretty much none of the Earths have humans on them. Only our central Earth has evolved human life. But as they go deeper into the chain of Earths, like a beaded necklace, they do find Earths where there's other life. And then there's aliens and there's all kinds of cool stuff. So Long Earth is an awesome 5-book series. If you like this type of story, definitely check that out. So let's get to talking about what would we do if we were a time traveler. So I'll put this question on the table. When would you go? When would you go to if you could time travel? Would you like to observe something? Would you like to stop something? What do you guys think?
Because I am such a history buff, I can't say that I would actually.
Makes it hard.
I don't think I would actually change anything.
Right.
But I would like to go back and observe. I mean, I think going back, obviously with our shared faith and our religious views, going back and seeing Jesus walk around and performing his miracles, the Sermon on the Mount, going and seeing some of that would be really cool. I love ancient Egyptian history, going back and watching the pyramids be built. Obviously from a distance, I don't want to get pulled into that. I'm not about the manual labor.
They see you show up out of a time travel hole and they make you the pharaoh and they call you God and boom.
I mean, who knows? It may have already happened. But so stuff like that would be really cool. We talked conspiracy theories a few episodes back. So, obviously JFK, I would like to go probably back to that on multiple occasions and just observe from multiple different perspectives. Was there a man on the grassy knoll? Was there the third shooter? What's
up with the umbrella?
the Zapruder film with the umbrella. So there's moments in history that I would like to go back and see. I would love to stand there and listen to Abraham Lincoln give the Gettysburg address. But I don't know if I would actually prevent anything because I mean,
you don't know what happened.
Yeah, you just don't know what would happen. I mean, as flawed as the world that we live in is, it's a pretty great time to be alive, and I don't know if I'd change any of that. I mean, now obviously you're going to get the people with the political views like, oh, I'd change, Trump from being president or stuff like that.
Oh
I'm not
no.
even getting into the political realm with this. I think,
So many
yeah,
things.
I think Abraham Lincoln giving the Gettysburg Address is as political as I would get.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that's where I'd go. I mean, I'd go in the past. I don't know if I'd want to see the future or see my future because
Oh
I
yeah.
don't want that to
That's
That
influence
messed
the
you up.
way I live my life.
mhm.
I think I've thought about this a lot, and I've always thought of, and I've always had this idea in my head, like this is how it's going to be if it works. I go in the past, and I would observe a lot of the biblical events, major events, like when God was inviting His people up the mountain on Mount Sinai, and Moses went
Mm.
in their place, and I just to see that awe and power and fear, but or things like I would like to observe Jesus coming out of the or the angel making the announcement that Jesus is not in the tomb anymore. And
Mhm.
in that very instance, man, it was a long, long time ago. I had a dream that I actually did that, and I was hiding in the bushes, and I was really close, and I was listening. I was like, "Whoa, it's such a cool event!" And the angel looked over at me. I was like, "Oh!" And then I woke up, like, "Dang it, he saw me." Um,
Ruined everything.
but
Like, how did you get here?
yeah,
Maybe it
what are you
wasn't a
doing here?
dream.
And yeah, you never know.
Whoa.
So things like that. But I always would really dream about going into the future, and man, I would totally exploit that. I would get major events and come back to my time, and then do the lotto maybe two times, and I would totally
Just
make money
two.
off of it. I really
Sure.
would. Yeah, just getting maybe $1 billion in my pocket, but I would make money off it somehow. I think I would be totally thrown off by what I would observe. I mean, I always think about bringing back like biblical character into modern times.
Wait, what are you, Bill and Ted? Bill and
Yeah.
Ted's Bible Adventure?
Oh, soul crates! Yeah, bring soul crates over here. And
Uh,
and if I was in the future too far ahead, I really couldn't enjoy it because I would have no idea what's going on, or maybe I'm the only
yeah.
carbon creature around, and everybody else
You're
is like,
organic.
yeah, and everybody else is energy, or they're all consciousness, or they're not even around. Just I don't know. So I don't think I'd enjoy the future very much if it was too far ahead because I would have no
Yeah,
way
yeah.
to appreciate it. Maybe like
There's
200 years ahead, but that might be too far ahead. I couldn't understand what's going on.
there's a really awesome book series. Again, I'm going to mention a lot of sci-fi books because that's what I listen to all day. So there's a really cool sci-fi book called The Forever War, and I think it's a trilogy or 4 or 5 of them. And in the Forever War, there's a soldier that travels on missions, through space really fast to get to his other planet to fight some battle, and he comes back to Earth. Well, what happens when you travel really fast through space? Time dilation. So every
Yeah.
time he comes back to Earth, it's like 100 years in the future, then 200 years in the future.
Oh,
Then
cool.
he goes really far out and comes back, and it's 1,000 years in the future. And he
Mm,
comes to Earth, and he has culture shock. There's no one speaking English.
yeah. No.
Everyone is homosexuality has been enforced by the government, and it's just normal society. Everyone's homosexual. Um,
Enforced.
every yeah, well, it's for like population control and
Oh
whatever.
my gosh.
So yeah,
Interesting.
it's just a whole different world, and he doesn't know what to do with himself. So he just leaves. He's like, forget this. I can't even blend in with humanity anymore. I can't go back. There's no going back. So, but I can't fit in here. So he just leaves and goes to some other planet and just lives there. Uh, but it's sad. But it makes you think like, what will human society be like in the far future? And I don't know if I want to go there.
Mhm.
It might just
Yeah.
freak me out.
Yeah.
Go back, look at historical stock figures and go back to, the 80s or early 90s and buy stock in Apple.
Hmm.
Bitcoin. Oh yeah, Apple and Bitcoin. Boom, rich. One of my friends, Mike Brown, he's actually been on the podcast. I asked this question on Facebook, which as I often do, and for this one, he said I would go back and invest in Bitcoin, like right before it went out. I'd buy the first Bitcoins for super cheap. They're like dollars worth.
Mhm.
Now they're $3,000-ish and up. Yeah, and I was like, that's genius, Mike. Of course. Yeah, for myself, I would also like to observe some major points and places in history, but both biblical history and otherwise. Like I'd love to see the Tower of Babel. I'd love to see the crossing of the Red Sea. But throughout history, I'd also like to see like the 7 wonders of the world. But I would
Yeah.
be tempted to change things. I'd be tempted to tell people who suffered through plagues, like, hey, there's these things called germs, and if you do this, you won't have to deal with them. Stop pooping in the streets. Here's how you boil water. Here's penicillin, for God's
Here's
sake.
how to wash your
Things like
hands.
that. Yeah, go figure. Which, by the way, God told the priests in the Old Testament how to wash their hands. So just putting that out there.
Anyway, yeah.
I did see an argument. Why didn't God tell them how to use soap? And they actually did. So things like the 9/11 attack, and I don't know how I'd even prevent that, because the facts of it are very, scattered, and you pick your conspiracy theory website to learn from. They're all different. But something like that, like I would be tempted to, at least try and prevent it, or prevent smaller things that I could actually handle on my own. I'd like to meet the major characters of the Bible. Well, I've got to see the Ark. That's a big one.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
I'll show up when the Ark lands. Somehow I'd learn to communicate with them and learn some ancient Hebrew. I don't know what it's Phoenician. I don't know what they spoke. And get the story for myself. And lastly, I would hang out with myself as a kid.
Well, with going back in the past of the Bible, you could publish yourself in the Bible, and you have the book of Second Daniels.
Second Daniels. I've always joked about writing Second Daniels, and now I finally get my chance at biblical canonical authorship. So, in thinking about time travel over the decades that I've watched movies and read stories about it, there's some things that have kind of stuck in my mind about what ifs, like what would happen if you time traveled and then this happened. So I kind of wrote a list of downsides to time travel that aren't often explored. Let's look at those. All right, so the first downside to time travel would be meeting yourself and, of course, the memory paradox that we talked about earlier. Let's say that I traveled back to my elementary days, and I, pretended to be a math tutor, because I've always been horrible at math. And I tutored myself. I really just wanted to hang out with myself and just, laugh at myself. But I tutored myself. Now, somehow my young self discovers that I am me. Like, that's me from the future. That's 30-year-old Daniel. Now I would suddenly have memories that when I was in elementary school, I met an old guy who, looked like me and was into the same stuff as me and was really interested in me. That sounds kind of creepy. I told my mom and dad about it, was scared. Yeah. So I would suddenly have these memories of myself, and that would just be like what happened to my brain, Second thing is getting sick. So antibodies are awesome when they work and when they have experience, taking care of certain stuff in our body. But what happens if you go back too far or forwards too far, and your body does not know how to handle, that version of the cold or that, flu virus or whatever? You could die from a common cold. If I don't know, I'm no scientist, but you get the idea. It's like, what if your body can't handle something? You go back too far, and oh shoot, you didn't wear a hazmat suit, or didn't bring your shots or whatever you need to stay safe. And then the opposite is true. What if you go back and you make others sick? What if you cause a huge outbreak of some sickness that you had as a kid that's still dormant in your body?
The Black Plague was your fault?
Yeah. Oh man.
No.
Dang it. I shouldn't have took a dump on that street when I had in London. Oh man.
I don't think you'd survive smallpox.
No.
or any of like the Black Plague or anything like that. So
another one, and this is a little more avant-garde, but hear me out. Missing the Earth. So we time travel, let's say 500 years into the past. Well, where is the Earth at that exact moment, 500 years in the past? Is it exactly under your feet? Maybe not. Do you travel with the Earth's momentum of going around the sun? Maybe not. Shoot, there goes time travel. You just time traveled into 500 years in the past, and now you're in orbit around the sun, and you die. I have this issue with stories where they jump into alternate Earths, like Long Earth, that book I mentioned earlier. That's one of they try to address it. But at the same time, I'm like, if you go to an alternate Earth, it may not be in the same place in orbit around the sun, and you've just jumped into space. Maybe you're in front of the Earth or behind it or whatever. That's a terrible way to die. Another thing is time traveling into something. So remember the time machine? How the time machine actually stays stationary and everything around it comes and goes.
I really didn't like that. It was really annoying
It was
because
great.
His shop got turned into like a parking garage kind of and a taxi service thing, and like wouldn't somebody look behind that curtain,
see that
into that little nook area that his machine was in, and like run into it or something, or I don't know.
No one noticed it.
I hated that. Like, what would happen if they got built into and he was there? What would they see?
Yeah, if you're in a stationary type of time traveling device and you're going into the future,
Really
that means
different.
that machine has to stay there. If someone like demolishes it or tampers with it somehow, like you're done
Hmm.
for. Now maybe you would have some kind of frozen stasis field around you because of the time passing, and they can't actually change anything inside that area, and you look like a frozen statue, um, moving super slow. But really, you're just looking to the left, which took 500 years for you to turn your head to the left.
They would make like a
And
museum out of you, and the whole
yes,
structure
yes,
around you
exactly.
would be like the eighth world wonder.
Yeah, they built a monument, the time traveler, and when is he gonna come out? Oh man, that would be so funny. That would be hilarious to see. So yeah, there you go. But if a tree happens to grow up under where you're sitting, or a
Well,
mountain, falls, I don't know, the ground opens up where you were when you're time traveling forwards or backwards, like that's the problem. You have to
yeah,
be completely stationary and not let any matter pass through your area somehow over that course of time.
Well, I
Um,
mean, under that, the hypothetical situation of your time machine is in the bottom of the Grand Canyon and you travel into the past. Well, the Grand Canyon wasn't always there. Do you automatically land
mm.
on top of what would become the Grand Canyon, or are you in like,
Does it push you up slowly
yeah,
as it unerodes?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah?
All right. So a few more is, if you time travel to the past, you are now adding mass to that universe that was not there. Now, I'm no physicist, but I know that mass can never be created or destroyed. And so if you're adding mass to a universe, what is that going to do to it? If a lot of people time travel, over a course of relative time, are they adding mass to a different universe? Are they taking mass away from our Earth? What does that do to things in the long run? I don't know.
Hmm.
But food for thought. Two more is being stuck in the past or future. Your machine, doesn't work. Short circuited, or now you're trapped in the past or the future.
They kind of talked about that in the movie Timeline with Paul Walker.
yeah,
Um,
Oh
that was good.
yeah, that dude.
uh,
Well, someone decides to stay in the past, right?
Well, yeah.
Hmm.
So after you time travel so much, it's like they explain it like a faxed copy. So your
Hmm.
blood vessels and your bones start shifting, and so it gets to a
Oh, that's
point where
cool.
you physically cannot travel either forward or backwards in time and again, or it'll kill
Oh.
you. And then so one guy, he loses his necklace. It's a pendant that he has to push to come back to the future. He loses
Yeah,
it,
they
so
call
he,
those
Wow.
yeah,
ceramic.
so he gets stuck, and then another guy decides to stay because he becomes, this powerful knight. And so yeah, it's
His fantasy, he gets to live out his fantasy.
yeah, so it was actually a pretty, I mean, I think that to me, not a lot of people that I've talked to about the movie actually enjoyed the movie. I liked it. I liked the concept of where
Hmm.
you can't just continuously time travel. Like you have a certain amount of times that you
Yeah,
can do this before it will either kill
that's good.
you or you
Hmm.
just learn I can't do this anymore and you accept that.
Yeah, I read that book back in high school, and it
Doesn't that
was really
story
good.
open with like a dead guy in the desert and he's like falling apart?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the doctor that kept traveling. And they took like an MRI
Mm.
of him, and they didn't understand the picture because it looked like the picture was cut, moved up like a millimeter, and
Oh,
then put back together.
gross.
So everything was all etched in lines, and like you said, his nerves and capillaries didn't line up.
I kind of wish that the transporter worked like that in Star Trek, because that's even more so. Like that's literally turning you into data, sending and reassembling you. What if one bits off? You die.
Brain
Is that
chemistry,
a thing in
then you
Star
go
Trek?
crazy.
Yeah, they had
Yeah.
they had talked about that in some episodes, and they've even had
Mm.
episodes where people get put back together incorrectly, or they actually get put back
Duplicated.
together, like
Yeah.
multiple people transport, and all of a sudden they come back and they're one person. Um, so they've had episodes and they've talked about that before, but
Mm.
it's Star Trek that, ultimately everything's going to be fine. We know what we're doing. Not everybody is Dr. Leonard McCoy, and you're not going to transport me. But yeah, so yeah, timeline talked about that, about getting stuck in the past. And
Mhm.
I think that's always an interesting concept because you just assume, well, I mean, even, well, going Back to the Future, Back to the Future 3, he gets stuck in the past because like the DeLorean was running off of energy and batteries from the future didn't exist in
radioactive.
the Old West, and so
Yeah. Yeah, in Timeline, the guy that stays in the past as a knight, he, has a family, and back in present time, I think near the end of at least in the end of the movie, they find a tomb that's his tomb.
yes,
And it's like he was now inserted into physical history because he stayed, and that was really cool to me.
My favorite part of the book wasn't too much about the changing of history, like he became a knight, fulfilled his kind of life dream, what he's been training for, but I liked the mechanics of how they time traveled. That whole almost full chapter of the process of them shrinking down to the quantum level, almost kind of like Ant-Man ish,
Oh,
and
really? Is
then
that how it
going.
worked?
Yeah, well, in the book it did. I don't remember so much about the movie, but the book they got in the middle of this kind of cage that was the panels were full of water to
Uh-huh.
protect it from radiation. And they're underground and all this, and panels started spinning, and the room started expanding it and bigger to them, but they were actually
Oh,
shrinking, and
cool.
it kept shrinking and shrinking. So eventually, the ground was like infinitely flat, and then it started to vibrate, and then hills started working up, and then mountains, and then they were infinitely tall, and then they started to look like bubbles, and the bubbles got big, and they fell between the bubbles. It was just over and over, just levels of shrinking smaller, smaller.
It's totally
Was
Ant-Man.
really like
yeah.
I really do think like yeah, like visual movies like Doctor Strange probably pulled some of the inspiration from this, and I don't know where they got the inspiration for what the quantum realm looked like, but it was pretty trippy. It was really cool. That was my favorite part of it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I forgot about that. I need to read that book. And of course, the last downside of time travel, which we mentioned earlier, is culture shock. The threat of not being able
Yeah.
to assimilate or be useful or even interact and survive ultimately in the past or in the far future. And language barriers, is a big thing. I just listened to a time travel story called Time Traders. And I started reading it and I was really good. And I was like, when was this book written? It was written in like 1956.
Oh, cool.
It was really old and it aged very well. There's only one mention of a pointy shaped rocket ship, which, all the rockets were pointy shaped like soda bottles and like a needle on top back in the 50s. But that was the only thing. Everything else in the book was solid. It was really great. And it's really cool because in that universe, or in that story, the time travel agents go through extensive training to learn the language, learn the culture, the religion, the customs. Even they learn how to hunt and live off the land if they're going back in the far past. So when they pop into the past, they can live. They can, be seen as like a normal person at that time. So there's two big blonde guys who are training to be Vikings because they're trying to go back to the Viking era and learn some stuff about history that we don't have, and they're trying to find clues of something through time. So I appreciated that level of detail because you would need to learn a lot to be able to function or to do
Well,
much of
that's what
anything.
the timeline. That's what they did. They went through extensive training on the language,
Yeah.
and they also had these earpieces that translated stuff conveniently.
Nice.
Yeah.
But
Google.
yeah, that was kind of neat. They had to train a lot for it.
It's cool. So let's talk about time travel in pop culture. Now, this is just sort of a funny aside, but I've realized that Rachel McAdams, who is one of my Hollywood crushes, she has been in 4 time travel movies, and she hasn't time traveled once. What's up with that? So she's been in The Time Traveler's Wife, Midnight in Paris, About Time, and Doctor Strange, and
Weird.
has never time traveled. Like, if I were her, I would make a fuss about this. I would petition Hollywood to write me
Come on.
a woman-led time travel movie so I could finally time travel. Dang it!
She just has that face of a time traveler's girlfriend or something.
Yeah, not the traveler's cell, but just the girlfriend, the wife. Got that face. Have you guys ever heard of John Titor?
No, I have not.
Oh, you're in for a treat with this one. So, John Teeter is a pseudonym for a character, fictitious. Well, let's hope so. It's a fictitious character who apparently was time traveling through history, made a stop in the year 1998, and began posting on message boards on the internet about the fact that he's a time traveler from the year 2036. And his story that people have pieced together from his various message board posts and even faxes that he sent to people to convince the public that, hey, I'm a time traveler, and here's what's going to happen in your future and this and that. The story was he was in the army and they were sending him on a mission back to the 70s to pick up an old analog computer that for some ridiculous reason could actually solve their problems in the future. The magic machine from the 70s or something dumb like that. But it was an old IBM 5100 computer that would solve some kind of problem. I forgot what it was. And yeah, so in January 2001, he started writing on message boards that he needed that computer. He needed to bring it back to the future to solve some issue that they were having. And he wrote about some future events that would happen, such as a civil war in America. Never happened. Russia attacking America in 2015 didn't happen. The Olympics were being canceled in 2004, and some other things that, of course, never came to fruition. And I think he brushed it off by saying, well, the multi-worlds theory is, the real one. It's like, oh, well, we were just in a different alternate timeline. Isn't that convenient? So your future will never see a civil war in, 10 years, but my history, I lived through the Civil War and the second Civil War. Yeah. And there's, he had a following back in the day where some people really thought this guy was legit. He at one point even posted detailed schematics of how his time travel machine worked. And it was really cool. It was like basically the DeLorean, but on a Jeep, an army Jeep, had this like device on it. It was like he gave some techno jargon that sounded really cool, but like double spin positron, temporal inverter, whatever.
Should have worked for Star Trek.
Yeah. I'm sure he just needed to reverse the polarity and he'd go right back to his original timeline.
It works every time.
Solve all the problems.
Put a banana peel and a soda can in there. That'll work.
Reverse the polarity of that banana, Captain. So that was kind of a funny little tidbit in history of someone claiming to be a time traveler, and some investigators around 2013 did a documentary about him, and they did track down the guys who originally made this myth, and I think it's two brothers, and one of them his name is John, and so they just made this thing, I guess, for fun. I don't think they made any money off of it, but yeah, pretty wacky.
That's crazy.
The early days of the internet.
Interesting.
And you can find a list of supposed time travelers that have been, either put themselves out there as a time traveler or weird things that happened. And sadly, a lot of them turned out to actually be urban myths that came from an actual sci-fi story. Like when my wife was reading to me, I got super excited because I thought it was legit at first. Not that I believed it, but I thought it was like more accepted as this may have happened. And supposedly this guy, Andrew something, made like $800 million on stock and with 13 successful trades in a row. And he claimed that he was from the future after he got arrested. Well, it turns out that was actually from like a pulp fiction, sci-fi magazine from the 50s. And someone repeated it. Someone heard them repeat it and said, oh, I heard about this guy who did trades and made all this money and he's a time traveler. And so now it's changed from, hey, I read this book to I heard about this guy. And that's the case for at least two or three of them that she was reading to me. But yeah, if you're interested in a history of time travelers, look up time travelers in modern history, and you can find some really wacky little stories, including some really weird photos of what seem to be modern people using cell phones and
I've seen those.
photos.
Yeah.
Have you seen them? They're great. And they're very convincing. They could easily be photoshopped. They could also just easily be a guy scratching his ear and he was holding his stopwatch in his hand or something, fuzzy film photographs from like the 1900s. You don't know.
Well, speaking of photographs and time travelers, you can also, it's become kind of a craze here recently of the celebrity time travelers of, historical photos held up next to like modern celebrities.
Yeah.
So like this,
I love those.
I'm actually looking at some right now. This person is like, my great grandfather looks just like Johnny Depp, and it's a picture of this person's great grandfather next to Johnny Depp, and the resemblance is actually kind of scary. Or
dude, Nicolas Cage has a good
Nicolas
one.
Cage, yes, Nicolas Cage has them. Eddie Murphy.
Timeless.
Yeah. So it's just the list goes. Okay, that's funny. My friend's boyfriend had a great-great-grandmother who looked exactly like Steve Martin if he were in a Victorian era cross-dressing comedy. And it actually,
you never know.
It actually really does look like Steve Martin. And so
that poor woman.
Yeah. And so
or poor husband.
So it's interesting. There's a picture of a man in 1939 Harlem that looks just like Jay-Z. So
that's awesome.
But yeah, so it is pretty interesting to see some of these photos. Daniel Radcliffe is another one like Nicolas Cage that is clearly a time traveler.
So they're just so rich and so elite and also so Illuminati, that they are now crossing into. You're so Illuminati. They're no longer doing vacations to the beach. They're doing vacations in time. That's how rich and elite they are. Wow.
Yeah.
Time traveling reptiles.
Uh.
That's how they got the T-Rex, and then Hitler was. Anyway.
Well, speaking of Hitler, let's talk about some time paradoxes. So these are logical and sometimes scientific problems that come up with various types of time travel, or rather, things you can do in the past or future. And yeah, so let's do the first one. This is often called the predestination paradox. It's also more technically called the causal loop because it has to do with the cause looping around and around and around. So what this is, the predestination paradox, is the time traveler goes back in time and causes an event that needs to happen in order for the time traveler to go back in time later. So, yeah. Now, we see this in a few different movies, such as Interstellar, the movie Predestination, for namesake, and Back to the Future. So, a few examples is in Interstellar. I love that movie. It's one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
But the one thing I don't like about it is the time paradox. It doesn't make sense. For example, let me explain. So, in the very beginning, first act of the story, what happens? The dad finds a secret NASA base who is planning, of course, a secret mission to go out in space, right? Now, how does he find that secret NASA base? Well, he gets binary GPS locations sent to him through his future self, through the shadows in that room with all the books, right? Through the dust and the ticking clock. I mean, it's not the ticking.
Gravity.
Yeah,
ticking
through
clock was
gravity.
at the end. Yeah.
Yeah, the ticking clock's a different message, but he gets the locations through, I think, through the shadows, like Morse code. Oh, yeah, it was Morse code. That's what it was.
It was the dust that was falling in the gravity lines.
Yes. So that's how he gave the GPS coordinates back to himself. But how did that future self get it? Well, he got it from his future self and the future of him. And it goes on forever and ever. There's no origin point. No one gave him the NASA coordinates to begin with. He always got it back from himself. And that is predestination paradox. Another example is predestination. I don't want to spoil the movie. Yeah, I'm just not even going to mention that because I want you to go see that movie and just have your mind blown. Back to the Future, we see things happen where he goes back in time and he makes sure that his parents stays together so that he can be born. He also plays that rock and roll song, thus inspiring rock and roll. It talks to the black guy who becomes mayor, and he inspires him to try to become mayor, so he becomes mayor. So it's like these weird loops that always repeat. And the fix to this paradox is, of course, having alternate universes where, like in one universe, he knows the GPS coordinates of the NASA base and he can tell, one universe of himself. And then that universe, I don't know if that could be a self-contained paradox there, but okay, so let's talk about the next paradox, which is called the bootstrap paradox. This is when a person, object, or piece of information is sent back in time in an infinite loop. So this is also seen in the Interstellar scene where we get the origins of the NASA base. And it's where the person or the object that was sent back never has an origin. It's just always been given from the future. And it goes on forever and ever. Third time paradox, this is the most popular. Even non-nerds, some of them know about this paradox. It's called the grandfather paradox. And this is where it says if you go back in time and kill, whether on purpose, if you're just bored and sick and sadistic, or accidentally, you kill your grandfather or... You kill your grandfather or prevent him from hooking up with, your grandmother. What happens to you? Are you never born then? Will you disappear? It's it's a paradox. So the description of this one says, if you time travel back and killed your parents or grandparents, you'd never have been born to time travel back and do so. So it's like you just bit your own, you're biting your tail in circles, going around and around in circles.
I wonder what that would look like. Like, how would you? That's a weird.
I mean, if there's alternate universes, it's a different thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Because,
well, we kind of see it almost played out a little bit in Back to the Future when he goes back and his mother starts falling in love with him, and we see on the photo his brother disappears, his sister disappears, he starts to disappear because she's falling in love with him and not his dad, and so. It is one of those.
She was really hot, so I mean,
understandable. I mean, it was definitely understandable, but it was.
Ew.
But it it'd still be one of those situations if you went back and, like you said, if you were, that sick and sadistic person, and you go back, or you accidentally, you know,
Yeah,
your time
intervene.
travel device your DeLorean accidentally runs over your father.
Runs over.
Um,
No.
yeah.
Don't
So, I mean,
undo.
would you just fade from existence? Would everything just kind of disappear, and there just all of a sudden be a dead body on the road with, you know, somebody come running out of their house, and it's like, how did this guy get in? This dead body show up? Because would
Yeah.
your time travel device disappear along with you? Or would he
Hmm.
actually still die?
Yeah, you could also be making a branch universe at that time where your grandfather never,
Yeah.
procreated or ever hooked up or whatever. So then you've got two timelines. You've got yours and then the new one you just made.
Yep.
And how do you make a universe? What does that even mean when you make a new universe?
Mhm.
That requires a lot of matter and energy. Last time I checked, so
Yeah,
maybe that's
wasn't
not
that a line
possible.
from the Sorcerer Supreme in the latest Avengers where she was explaining the timeline to the Hulk, and she said it creates a new universe or something?
Uh huh.
I think she
I don't
used that
recall.
verbiage.
What? Say that again.
I think she used that verbiage like you create when a choice is made or something is changed from one universe, another one is created.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Avengers did a really weird spin on time travel where in Endgame, they have to go back and return the stones before anyone notices that they're gone, so that they can basically return everything back onto one single timeline.
Hmm.
So there is a branch of universes, but they get rid of those branches and they restore it back to one single timeline by putting everything back and tidy in the right place.
That's too convenient.
And
I don't like that.
yeah, it's like those stones missing or not missing is not the only change you just made. There's a lot of other changes happening, and I just had a lot of problems with that. If you want to hear more about this, go find our end game movie review episode. It was pretty deep, and we talked about this because I didn't like what they did with that time travel theory. It was fun, made for a cool movie, but it didn't
Yeah.
really make sense. Didn't hold up logically. Um. All right, so the last time paradox is called the Kill Hitler paradox.
Yes, I would.
um,
I
yes, please.
don't care.
Sign me up. And this paradox says if you go back and change an event, you have just removed the reason why you time traveled. So, can you stop something from happening at all? Because if you do, you would never have time travel. Or maybe your memory changes and you just have lost all your memory and you're like, why am I here? Why am I in this world without Hitler? But you don't know any better. And no one knows any better. It's just a world without Hitler, and no one can even appreciate what you've done because no one knows that he ever existed.
Yeah, that would kind of
Um,
force the theory of the multiple
mhm.
universes where the choices were made, and maybe you wouldn't see the benefit, but then that would start off another branch.
There's a cool book I read called In Time, I think it was. So in this story, there's time travel agents that go back in time to basically track down a rogue time traveling agent who made a cult about himself, made a world religion that became huge in the future. And it's a really great story. It's a shame that this is just one of those like no name ebooks that like no one even knows about. But yeah, so what happens is the time travelers have time travel protection fields that they set up whenever they set up base. So there's future agents in the 2000s, and they have this old house that they've bought, and they're collecting historical records, and they're amassing this huge like library of historical books, and they have a time travel protection field because they want to preserve what history would have been before the guy changed anything.
Yeah.
So basically, if I go back and I don't know. What's a big event that I could easily change? If I go back and assassinate Abraham Lincoln as he's a kid, he never grows up, and the slavery thing gets put off till later decades, and there's more slaves, whatever. So all the history books would be rewritten, right? Because Abraham Lincoln never grew up and did what he did, never became president, never fought slavery, and this and that. So all those textbooks are now instantly updated throughout time, but
Yeah,
they have a time protection field set up in their house. So all their history records are safe. Isn't that cool?
that's cool. I like that
That
idea.
is
Never heard of
that
that.
is really
Hmm.
cool.
Of course, one of the agendas of the bad guys when they get on site is to destroy that field and just ruin all the history records that they've been amassing. But they're
Hmm.
trying to see what history was like before the rogue agent like just ruined everything with his little cult addiction. And it's funny because he jumps throughout time. He confirms his own like supernatural deityness in his cult because he time travels. He goes every 100 years. He shows up and does a new prophecy or whatever.
Hmm.
pretty smart and evil use of time travel.
Well, a lot of scientists kind of like the idea of jumping like that and proving his deity. Scientists today have said, if time travel is possible, we would have already met somebody,
Mhm.
and like the time travel, they're trying to send like a photon before it was sent,
Oh,
and
weird.
yeah, so it would have already come back before we sent it,
Yeah.
and we haven't gotten that yet. So we're kind of waiting for it to show up before we press the button.
So
So
that's
it's
kind of that's kind of
interesting.
that's kind of a forward looping time paradox where
Yeah.
let's say a scientist set up a lab to send a photon back to the day before where they were waiting for it. It didn't show up, so they didn't actually do the experiment because they said, "Well, I guess it didn't work. It never came back, so we don't do it."
Yeah.
But they don't do the experiment to send it back. Ah.
Weird. Yeah,
Huh.
so they're just kind of waiting around for this machine, and I think it's still running, and it's trying to send a photon through certain fields, and it should show up in the same spot at the
Mhm.
same time it's sent, or a few seconds before, or like nanoseconds before, or something like that. So they're just kind of waiting
Yeah.
around for it to happen.
To pop into existence, but they haven't done the experiment yet to do it, so it's weird. Or maybe they have, but they'd already passed that timeline. They already passed that time of that span of time. Oh, a little correction here: that In Time book I mentioned was not called In Time; it's called Time Bound, and it's by Rissa Walker, and it's the Chronos Files. I haven't even read the other books, but I really like the first book. So you mentioned the scientific experiment of sending something back to be observed or to prove time travel. And here's a really cool plot that I've seen in a lot of time travel stories where the time travelers can only go back as far as the machine was turned on. So let's say we make the
Oh yeah.
machine, we turn it on Monday, and now it's Friday. We can only go back to Monday. We can't go before Monday because the time travel machine was not turned on before that. We see that in the movie Primer. Have y'all seen Primer?
Mm-mm.
No, I've not even heard of
Oh
that.
man, watch it, but just prepare to be confused because it is such a well thought out time travel. It's worse. Well, not worse, but it's more convoluted than Terminator.
Oh.
Oh, gee.
And
Oh,
we all know
geez.
Terminator is one of the messiest. Yeah, it's one of the messiest time travel plots that you can ever imagine. But Primer is actually solid and well thought out, and it all
Hmm.
makes sense if you can handle it. If you want to do like a dive down like 10 hours of YouTube videos to understand it, you'll get it. But and I don't fully grasp it, but they do make a machine that inside this box, it's literally like the size of a coffin, and inside of it time goes backwards. So what you do is you turn it on, let's say at 8 a.m. And that's the time you want to come into later. So later down the road, when it's say 3 p.m., you want to say, okay, it's time to go back to 8 a.m. You sit in the box for what is it? 5 plus 8, 12 hours. Wait, did I do my math right? 13 hours. You have to sit in the box for the same amount of hours that you want to go backwards in time because time flows in reverse inside the box.
Oh yeah.
But you can only go back as far as when you turned it on. You actually have to switch it on for it to start reversing time. And you sit in the box and you're flowing backwards in time in the box. And then you come out at 8 a.m.
Oh.
And it's like that, but like there's like 2 or 3 levels. And he even
Uh,
brings a box inside of the box. Like he puts a time travel box inside the time travel box. It's
It's
crazy.
a Schrodinger's time travel device.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. It didn't really happen.
yeah.
Is he traveling? You'll never know. Is he just taking a nap?
I'm not entirely sure
The
if I'm
cool,
smart enough to have that conversation. My head hurts now.
yeah, it's
I gotta see
wild.
that.
But Primer is extra cool because it was an indie film and it was only made with like $5,000 or something like that.
Those are the best.
Um, yeah, it's just they spent all the effort on the plot
Yeah.
and the layers and the background stuff that's happening at the same time, so they don't like encounter themselves while they're time traveling and work in the stock trade. It's pretty cool.
Hmm.
Um, all right, let's talk about a real form of time travel that we can actually observe and do here and now today, and that is space travel,
Yeah.
time dilation, relativity. So, if you travel fast enough through space, you will be able to measure the difference in time that has passed for yourself versus where you left, which is not moving. And we see this in quite a bit of sci-fi movies because it's been solid science since like Einstein. Um, but the biggest movie that's made it most popular is Interstellar, where what was the dad's name in that movie? His name was Murphy. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Murph. That's all I
Murph
remember.
all the time.
Walt.
Walt. Murph.
Walt. um, That's fine. So the dad is traveling, with the crew to a black hole that's floating in or a wormhole rather, that's floating in our solar system, and it basically warps him through space to go somewhere else. And because of all this traveling and distance, time on Earth is passing really fast. But also, the solar system that he ends up in has higher gravity, like waves, because there's a black hole. I'm guessing in the center of the solar system. So because of the heavy gravity, that also warps space-time, and time is passing really fast depending on how close you are to the black hole. And on the outside world, relative to you. That's why it's called relativity. It's all relative to where you're positioned. If you're an outside observer or if you're an active participant in the traveling, time will pass differently for you versus them. So let's say I fly to Pluto like half the speed of light and I come back, which I'm not sure how long that would take. I don't know, month, 2 months, not sure. Or I Google that, but so I travel to Pluto and I come right back. For me, let's say a month has passed, but on Earth, maybe 6 months has passed. So for me, time passes slowly, but from my point of view, Earth is passing fast. But it's the opposite for the other side of the game. So from Earth's point of view, for me, time for Daniel in the ship, time has passed slowly, whereas on Earth has passed normal. It's all relative to where you're observing from, and that's where it gets really confusing.
The other day, I was sharing this funny little joke with my karate students, and I said, "You're time traveling right now," and I was freaking them out. Well, what are you talking about? Your feet are going faster than your
Impossible.
head because they're closer to the center of the gravity of the Earth, so your feet are
Oh
time
yeah.
traveling faster than your head. And they're like, "Whoa!" Anyway, back to your study. Back to knuckle push-ups.
We're also time traveling at 1 second per second, so there's also that.
Whoa. Well, they tested like two atomic clocks that were supposedly synchronized perfectly, and they sent one in the satellite, which was not even close to the speed of light or at all.
No.
Just several Mach. I don't know what it was, but orbiting. And then they brought
100,000
them back
miles.
together, and it was just like a billionth of a nanosecond off. But whoa, time travel, the speed, enough speed and time made it off a little bit.
Very weird how space, which is like three-dimensional, moving left, right, traveling over there, going up or down. The third dimension is connected to the fourth dimension. Space and time are linked, and
Yeah.
depending on velocity or speed of space travel, or if there's gravity, which affects space and also affects time, this time flows differently. It's so trippy and weird.
Yeah, your
But
speed will make a dip in that space time, and it'll create
Mhm.
gravity and mass. It's so
And that's what
strange.
gravity is.
Yeah.
Yeah. But as far as I've learned, there's no one that believes you can reverse the flow. It only goes forwards. All right, before we go any further, we do have to say goodbye and thank you to Josh. He had to leave due to some scheduling conflicts, leave a little early in this podcast, but we are so thankful for having him on the show and for all his input
Yeah.
and expertise. So thanks, Josh, and we'll see you next time very soon, hopefully. Gabriel, do you have any favorite time travel movies or books or shows?
I liked one of my favorite, and it was a simple one, was A Time Traveler's Wife. I really liked the idea that it was like a genetic defect, and I guess in the story it was kind of suggested that people have been born with this, but most of them die in infancy because they accidentally time teleport out of their mother's womb and they die.
Wow, I forgot
There's like a
about
fetus
that.
that was really cool. And well, that's what, spoiler if you haven't seen it, but that's what happened to his daughter.
That's right.
After his past future self impregnated his current wife that was a child. So
Yeah.
all of a sudden, I think the baby disappeared, or it was suggested that the baby was no longer in there. So they're always wondering, well, great, the baby's dead. But the daughter, I think they did a few retrospective scenes where the daughter was actually in the scene watching her dad and mom fall in love.
Whoa.
You had to watch that movie again because she, at the
I
very
do
end,
need to.
she was, there was like two scenes where she was in the background somewhere watching her parents fall in love.
That's awesome.
It was pretty cool. So the baby learned how to control it at a very young age, but she somehow survived out of the womb,
Yeah. Huh.
actually accidentally teleporting out.
Wow, that's cool. Well, talking about genetic powers of time travel, there's one of my favorite movies on my list is called About Time, and it came out in 2013. And the main actor is the guy who plays General Hux in Star Wars. I forgot the guy's name. Skinny redhead dude. He's a great actor, by the way. He can do a lot of different characters. But yeah, this movie was cool because in this story, all the men of a certain family line have the ability to time travel.
Yeah.
And he learns about it from his father, or rather he does it, and then he learns that his father has it too, and his father's like, yeah, all the men have had it. And he's trying to go back and win a girl. He's a total
Yeah.
dweeb. So he's trying to use that to learn all the angles, learn what to say exactly, what not to do, and things like that. So really fun family drama with little time travel thrown in there. And this is a good one because it's a great story that has time travel thrown in. It's not the other way around. It's not an exposition about time travel theories with some human characters in the middle.
Yeah.
They don't explain time travel other than, yeah, it's genetic. All the dudes have it, and they just leave it at that. And I'm totally fine with that. I like it.
Yeah, I like that too. And I felt at first in the beginning, I felt, oh, great, another Hallmark drama chick flick. And actually, Sarah, she chose to watch it because the previews look kind of cool and there's some relationship stuff. And I was kind of reluctantly watching it with her. And then, oh, wow, time travel. Okay, well, you got me hooked. And
She good. Sarah McAdams. Can't go wrong with her.
yeah, she was satisfied because it was drama and chick flick stuff. And then there was enough mystery and sci-fi suggestions. The time travel, I was going to watch it and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, we mentioned earlier Sarah McAdams. That's one of her 4 time travel movies she's been in without time traveling. One of these days she'll get her own time travel flick. Some other favorites on my list are Endgame. Now it's weird. I love the movie to death, and the time travel was super fun, but I felt like there were some problems with their example of time travel with the theory that they took. They basically were saying that, yeah, we've screwed up all of time because we took all these stones to save the day. But if you go back and put them right back, then everything will snap back onto one single timeline. And I just don't feel like that is how time travel would work.
Yeah, because on their theory, that's just another choice. So you branch off to another one. I don't know.
Yeah, and Captain America's got his branch, which is awesome. I'm not complaining about that. But if you want to learn more about this, go back and find our Endgame movie review episode. It was awesome. And I think I ranted in more detail about the time travel problems. If you want to learn more about that, of course, Groundhog's Day was hilarious and fun.
Oh my gosh! Now that was another one that was not suggested on how and why and like what was happening to him.
No, there was magic. There was magic involved. He got hexed by the lady in the elevator, I think.
Oh, I don't
some
remember
woman
that.
Cursed him or hexed him or something. There was that, but then they just leave it.
I like the idea that he knows every little thing that's going to happen. Especially, I mean, Bill Murray is just great, and I love all of his movies. So he knows everything, and just this lady has no idea what's going on, and he's calling off every little break, and person walks in and orders this, and learns piano.
That's like Tom Cruise in Edge of Tomorrow. He memorizes where every missile is going to go, and every explosion, every bullet, and is genius. What else? Butterfly Effect, of course, is super.
Yeah, that was good.
It was kind of a heart tugging, just a reality check. Is like, maybe you should mess with time, And that was a creative spin too, because it took him reading through his journal to take him back to that moment. That was cool.
That's kind of neat. Yeah, he would have to get that kind of emotional attachment, kind of like the idea of Jumper. He had to see a photo to where he wanted to jump to. Awesome. Kind of neat.
Jumper was so underrated. That was a cool movie.
I loved it. I don't know why please don't do a sequel of it, but standalone. And then his mom being a paladin, that was cool.
Oh, I forgot about that. Shoot, I need to go rewatch that now. It's been a while.
Yeah, dang it. Spoiler.
Yeah. I've got Deja Vu on my list. That was another underrated, super creative movie.
That was totally underrated. I didn't see much buzz about that. And my favorite part of that was when he was in the power station. They were viewing the lady that they were trying to solve the murder of. And he shined a laser. He was playing with a laser, and he shined it on the lampstand or something, lampshade. And she saw it, and then everything shut down. So his photons that he sent back somehow through the camera reflected off the screen.
It had to have been more than a screen. It was like a projection window into time travel. It was a time travel window. It would have to be,
yeah.
Which is genius. And yeah, that plot twist, oh man, it's so good. Because you think it's one thing, which is totally cool. Like just surveillance around the whole planet. That's cool. But then it's so much more.
And the possible mixture of that love connection. Like she felt like there's somebody watching.
Yeah.
But they're viewing the past. So that spiritual element of love passing time, kind of interesting. And same thing with Brand in Interstellar.
Yeah.
The love is the only thing that can transcend space and time. So it's kind of those themes.
A little woo-woo with the sci-fi. Nothing wrong with that. A little bit of it goes a long way, though. Deja Vu came out in 2006, and there are some really good VFX in that movie. I love that one scene where like time kind of freezes and they're looking through the living room of the lady character. I forgot her name.
Oh yeah,
And she's like pixels in 3D. It's really cool.
that was well done.
Yeah, it was very well done. You got to give it to those VFX artists because they were really paving some new ground with that look. Next on my list is X-Men: Days of Future Past. This was super exciting, really fun movie, good action, some cool time travel stuff going on, sending his consciousness back. Which I take it back. It looks like Butterfly Effect was one of the earliest ones that I can think of sending your mind back as a form of time travel. Because that was way
I can't
before
think of any
X-Men.
other.
And that, like I said earlier, that's my favorite time. But that's my favorite type of time travel is like consciousness time travel.
Yeah, that makes more
and
sense. Maybe
it does. It's probably more impossible, but it's more logical. It's like a trade off.
Day of the Future Past thing with the character that had that ability. I didn't really like how it was explained. I guess it was explained, but I didn't catch it. But
Hmm.
that same character could walk through walls and 1, 2, 3, and now she's able to send consciousness through time. I don't know if that's like an evolution of her
Yeah.
powers or like an enhancement from
What kind of power
Xavier.
is that? And apparently Wolverine was the only one they could do it on because he could regenerate, right? Like his brain cells could heal from the thing. So how did she have this power? Like if it's all about evolution and discovering powers and thus you have it, how did did she actually send someone back in time and it killed them?
Oops. Let me hover
She's
my
like, I've
hands
been
over your temples.
yeah, and now she's
Hmm.
like, oh, finally I have someone I can use my power on and not kill. Yay. It's just that was a stretch.
But I like the idea of sending the consciousness. And he wakes up, Wolverine wakes up in that room, and the guys bust in, and he kills them, and he notices he
That
had,
was
yeah, that
awesome.
was really good.
Donnie Darko, have you seen that?
I've never seen that. I've seen like all the memes. I've seen that, but
Yeah.
I've never seen the movie.
It is something else. It's kind of got an indie feel to it, but at the same time it's high budget and well made.
Christian Bale.
No, it was Jake Gyllenhaal. And yeah, if you look up flowcharts to understand the time travel in this movie, it's almost as convoluted as Terminator, but not quite. It's a little more logical and less retconning. Another one on my list is Live, Die, Repeat, which is also known as Edge of Tomorrow and also known as All You Need Is Kill.
AKA.
Yeah, depending on the country and the release of the movie, it had 3 different freaking names. Very confusing to us Americans. I think All You Need Is Kill was the Japanese release name, and then Edge of Tomorrow was the American name, but then they realized it was too vague and wasn't attracting attention, so they renamed it as Live, Die, Repeat for the DVD release. I think that's what it was.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I own the DVD, but then I wanted to download the digital, so I was totally legal. But I downloaded the Live Die Repeat. Yeah, and I wasn't sure what it was. Like, what is this title? This looks cool. So I downloaded it. Like, what the
Wait
heck?
a second.
And it put the wrong title on there. That's stupid.
Classic.
And yeah, I like that. Is there any theories of how many times he jumped back?
No.
Like any Reddit theories? Like he jumped back 500 times or...
I don't know. I love this movie. It was really well made. I think there's a sequel being made about it, which is exciting. And talking about the different names of the movie, when I rented it on Redbox, it was Live, Die, Repeat. Last one on my list is Travelers, which is actually a online series on Netflix, and it is so good. The characters are deep. The setup and the story is really intriguing. Again, this is a consciousness time travel story. So future time agents are sending their consciousness back to people who in current day would be dying of some natural or unstoppable cause. So in history, they were recorded as dying for sure. In the future, that's what the record said. So they would send an agent back into their brain just at the moment before death. They would, stop them from dying, hopefully, and then they would be an active time agent within the person's body. And that story is just really great. There's a lot of cool stuff that happens.
I never finished it, but I did like the first. I think I finished the first season, or I didn't. Almost there, but I didn't finish it. No, I did like it though.
Yeah, I think there's 2 or 3 seasons. I've seen at least the first 2. It's cool because when they time travel back, they're not just a time traveler and they go on with a new life and do their agenda or their mission. They still have to live in the life of the modern day person. And no one knows that person was about to die, of a heart attack alone at home or their car get hit by a train. Yeah, so they still have the memories of the person they jumped into. They still have to deal with the family and the relationships, and that provides for some really great storytelling and character building, alongside the secret life, which is they're actually a time traveler back in time to fix stuff and keep things from going to hell.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have any other favorites on your list?
I was Continuum was a really good one too, and I
Yeah.
sometimes in my mind I mix those two up because they almost have the same look or feel. But I
Mhm.
like the idea that the agent that was sent back into the past, I think it was by accident, and she has these like optical implants and memory implants, so she has like
Cool.
perfect memory recall that she can see in her eye, and the kid that invented that is was then older, but it's a younger self. So when she teleports
Oh.
back, she's now on the frequency he's trying to use his technology on, and she finally comes up on his frequency as like a radio, and
Mm.
he's, whoa, it finally works. Who are you? And who are you? And
Oh, that's cool.
oh, I work for your older self. And oops.
Wow.
And now he hacks into her implants and stuff, and now able to see through her eyes and talk to her and help her out. So he's kind of like the guy behind the desk with all the
The guy
useless
in the chair.
screens.
That's what it's called.
Yeah,
Guy in the chair.
yeah. He's the guy in the chair. He even has all the charts with the strings attached with the pictures.
Oh, yes, the crazy
It's bad.
wall.
Yeah.
Every movie, every
Guy in the
show.
chair and the crazy wall.
Double cliche.
Double.
You can't investigate anything in TV world without strings and
Impossible.
pictures hanging from the ceiling or on your wall. It's just you just can't research anything without that.
And then Heroes. No, yeah, Heroes. Hero.
Oh
He
yeah.
was a time traveler too. That was probably my favorite use of the power, it being genetic, and
Hmm.
he was sent himself his whole body back into the past, and he wasn't sure how it happened, and his future self came back a few times, and he was totally hardened and badass with the
Super
ponytail and the samurai
hardcore.
sword.
Yes.
Yeah, that was totally cool.
I loved it because current day hero is such a little nerdy pushover, shy guy, and then future heroes like samurai sword on his back, dark clothes. Yeah, he was so cool.
And I don't think he had an accent. He didn't have his Japanese accent, his future
Oh,
self. I
really?
think he
How
spoke just
funny.
real clear in English, which is, you don't really lose your accent that like that.
That's well, in a post-apocalyptic future, you have to.
Yeah.
That's funny. I forgot
To
about
survive.
Hero. Man, so that's it for our some of our quick favorites of time travel movies or stories. Now, let me ask you this open-ended question: what would you change if you could go back?
Oh
Would you
man.
try to change history? Would you just want to observe? What would you like to do if you could time travel?
Well, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I was talking to my wife again about this morning, kind of getting some feedback. It really depends on what theory is actually true,
Yes,
or which one you prefer
exactly.
to be true. So I tend to like the idea that choices branch off and it doesn't affect your timeline. Then that suggests like multiple universes. And I don't know, but
Hmm.
if that's true, well, then it's kind of pointless to try to change events. I also like the idea that history will always correct itself. So I think that's the most
Yeah,
logical.
that's cool. That's intriguing.
Um, so
Hmm.
like in the time machine, his fiance is going to die no matter what he tries to do.
Would you work it for money?
I'd probably go to the future and then come back with that information and make money,
Oh,
just so that I could just live comfortably, not have to worry about things today.
yeah.
So I'd totally go to the future, but not too far ahead, because if you go too far ahead, you get lost in culture. You might get caught,
Hmm.
and they capture you and
Oh
put you in a
yeah.
time bubble because they know you're a time traveler because your frequency is not of their time or whatever. They totally catch you. Go to the past, you might make people sick, or you get sick
Hmm.
yourself.
Yeah.
Um,
A lot of problems with time travel.
but I definitely would observe a lot of things.
I would love to go back and just for the observational side of things, which is much more safe. I would like to just observe major historical moments, most of which biblical. I would like to see, the Tower of Babel. I'd like to see the splitting of
Yeah.
the Red Sea, all the big milestones. But of course, in the secular world, I'd like to see like the seven wonders of the world being created, and maybe sneak along a real small camera and just blend in with the crowd, take some photos.
Apparently that's happened. They have photos of people
Yeah.
with. That's
Hopefully, I
so
don't get
weird.
recorded.
Get caught, and then
There's some funny photos you can find online of supposed time travelers that have been caught in the act of old photos, from like the 20s or 1800s, and people look like they're
they're
carrying
holding
a
their
cell
phone up.
phone. Yeah. Or wearing hipster clothes, things like that.
Well, years
Um,
ago, I was little, and I didn't really think of it or remember it until I was kind of thinking about this episode. And I always had this dream of time traveling, and you and I, we
mm,
always talked about sci-fi stuff
mhm.
growing up. And one of the dreams I had was I'm going to go see the announcement that the angels made that Jesus is no longer in the tomb when he resurrected and the stone was rolled away, whatever that looked like. I
Yeah.
always had the dream of observing that in the bushes. So I was maybe even just a few yards from the entrance, and the angels appeared, tell the women he's not here. They run away, and once they're gone, the angel looks over his shoulder and looks at me through the bushes, and oh crap, I got caught, and then I wake up. So I always thought that was kind of a funny idea that the angels transcended time, knew I was going to be there or something.
Maybe you were time traveling.
Yeah.
If I had the control and luxury to time travel back to my present and go back multiple times, I would probably first do some very unobtrusive experiments to see which theory of time travel is accurate. So
Oh
I
yeah.
would find some innocent part of my childhood that, could be changed either way and not affect who I became. And I would play with it. Like, a favorite shirt I had, or I don't know, some toy that I had that I remember for sure, this color or whatever. Like I would change it. And then I'd come back to present day and I would see if maybe a photo of that thing was different or if the memory of that thing was changed, which I guess you wouldn't really know if it's a memory.
Bring the photo and then move an object from the past over a little bit, compare it with a photo, see if it disappears and moves.
So that's like Back to the Future. What if you write down in great detail some specific childhood memory, right? You write it down on
Yeah,
paper.
yeah.
You go back and change it, come back to the present, and you look at what you wrote down. And you're like, wait a second, that's not what I remember. That would mean your
Yeah.
memory has just been tampered with.
Cool.
Yeah, that's I've never seen that in a movie actually before. So I would do an experiment like that. If you can't change something, then it's that first theory, which is a single universe. You can't change anything. Whatever you do has either already been done by you, or you just cannot change anything at all because it's already happened. Or if you can change things, then yeah, photos would be updated, memories might be altered, stuff like that would change. Somehow I don't know how you detect it, but the branch universe theory, which you just made a whole new universe, and your universe has not been affected. So it would be nice if there's a way to know, because that would really change what I would do. I do not want to screw up the rest of the time.
That'd be pretty much a curse.
Yeah, I don't want to inadvertently like wipe out all of Western America by, making someone sick over in Europe.
You wear a hazmat suit and go back to the past, and they would say you're an alien, and then they write all these books about it.
Oh no!
You're like, crap! I messed up again. I can't.
Dang it!
No escape.
Anything you do ruins everything. Yeah, I actually was writing a story with some friends of mine about time travel, and what I did in my part of the story, which I got to write, I had the second chapter. Basically, some spacefaring people have accidentally traveled to the past, and so what they do to experiment to see what type of story, time travel theory we live in, they actually plant hidden messages in some ancient relics that have never been touched or opened or changed, like the mountainsides and ancient sites and things like that. They hide some messages there that has areas that have never been explored, and then
cool.
they look in their database to see if future selves discovered those things, to try to see either way if they actually are changing time retroactively or not. That's something I would probably try to do first before I screw up everything.
When I was talking to my wife today about the time travel, it's probably really boring her, but she seems to be involved, and she actually brought up a really important question.
Ooh.
She asked, "Well, is the future really there? We have the past, but
Great question.
is the future really there? You drop a pebble in the ripples and they spread out, but how can you forward if it hasn't happened yet?" And that was kind of interesting. So I don't know if you've run into
That's deep.
that idea in the books you've read. Where is the future? Where does it come from? How is it there?
Sadly, I think that ball has been dropped big time in sci-fi. I don't recall any time travel story where they try to go to the future, but they just can't. They always can, which is logically not really solid because it hasn't happened yet. It has not unfolded. Your decisions tomorrow have not been made yet. So how can you go to that place when they've been made? Do you even have free will if you can do that? That's a lot of problems. There's a really cool book called The End of Eternity. It's, of course, Isaac Asimov, one of the best. And I encourage, if you like time travel, definitely check out End of Eternity, because there's some really, really neat stuff that he does with time travel agencies in the future, traveling to different centuries. And then there's future time travel agencies also doing their own thing. And yeah, that was a definitely worthwhile read. But I would probably like to work a few lottery tickets and get some good money. Maybe invest in some stocks like Bitcoin and Apple, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always had this weird fantasy of like accidentally being sent back into like the medieval days, or 1800s. My idea is I would make a living off of the music that I remembered. I would write all these amazing songs that I remember from 21st century and 20th century, or I would make pieces of art or write stories that I had already read, which is total plagiarism.
yeah. Hasn't happened yet, so
I could write some crazy sci-fi in the 1700s, and they wouldn't even know what to do with that. Actually, they probably try to burn me at a stake. So
get a rope.
You can't be careful how progressive you are when you go back to the far past. Don't be too sciencey in the 1500s. You'll definitely get burned alive. Okay, so I wanted to close out this episode by kind of doing a brief overview of some of the famous time machines we've seen in fiction and literature. So the first, of course, has got to be the time sled from The Time Machine. I love the portrayal that they do in the movie. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, that was great.
It's like steampunky. It's Victorian. It's shiny.
I wonder where that prop is now. It's got to be in some. Got to be somewhere on display. That's great.
If that was torn down and like melted or trash, shame on those people, because that's one of the coolest Hollywood props I've ever seen.
Yeah, really well done.
So the time sled is cool. Now I had read that in the book it's actually very different how it was presented. I don't remember that. But the next time travel device is the time turner in Harry Potter, the Prisoner of Azkaban. That was a cool little gimmick they used in that story, and I liked the time travel of that movie. It was interesting. It was like
I liked it.
You couldn't really change the past, because the things that you did, you think you were changing, were actually already happened to you.
Yeah, so they were following the first theory that you mentioned.
Yeah, unchangeable time, yeah. And Harry goes back and finds himself about to die, so he saves himself, but then he remembers, wait, I did this, but I thought it was my dad. It was actually me saving me.
See, that was cool. Safe, because if he saw himself, then when he went to the past, I think it was a really good writing that she did with that. But I liked how like Hermione's mistake of snapping the twig made their future selves look behind and then saved them from being seen or something like that.
Yeah.
Or they were throwing rocks at each other to duck or whatever. Yeah, that's what it was.
Genius. Yeah, they already heard the sound, they looked, and then later in the movie, you see them time travel and throw a pebble, and that's the sound that they heard. So cool. I like that stuff. So that's a time turner. Oh, if you're a real Harry Potter fan, I encourage you to go to the Pottermore website and look up the time turner. There is some really cool, like, fictitious history about the time turner and like bad things that it caused, such as wizards going back and seeing themselves and either going insane or dueling themselves and dying and killing themselves. Weird stuff. So that was
killing their younger self off.
Yeah, that was the same. Yeah. So that was a fun deep dive if you want to check out the time turner myth. Next is The Box from Primer. And I got to give it to this movie because, like I said earlier, it was super low budget and it just kind of makes it that much more believable. Like this box that these college kids make, it's not some fancy, shiny, like high technology thing that looks like, how good do they even manufacture this device? It's literally made out of like tarp and metal and plastic and stuff.
Literally a box.
It's thrown together. Yeah, it's like a rectangle. You can barely fit inside, and they have to take an oxygen tank with them to breathe.
Cool.
I think the time inside the box goes backwards. So however long you're in the box, that's how far back in time you can go. But you can only go back as far as the time machine was turned on, like say that morning. So cool rules. And I like when there's rules set up that, they don't have to over explain why there's this rule. You just kind of accept it, but that rule makes the story go in certain directions. You can't just do anything you want, Like they can't sit in the box and go back to the 12th century. The box wasn't there. But it was there this morning, and they turned it on, and the time flows begin to reverse, and this weird stuff.
The whole idea of dialing a specific date kind of throws me off a little bit. I don't know if you could even control time travel like that. I mean, you might be able to control the flow, but dialing it in and then the coordinates and all of that, it just seems a little too convenient.
Yeah, like the DeLorean. They have a digital display of the hour and the date and the year. How does that work? It's funny. What if
I guess if you have coordinates of like space coordinates, XYZ, then you might have, or XY, I guess you could have the Z, and then you'd have the fourth dimension.
Yeah,
what that coordinate would look like, that'd be the time.
Omega, I don't know. We need a fourth letter.
Weird.
Mm-hmm. Next device is the spherical chamber. I don't even know, couldn't find a name for it, but this is in Looper. And it's this really cool, like heavy, thick metal. Looks like under like a deep sea pressure chamber. And they go in there, close the door, and pop back in time. And I don't remember, did they go back to when the machine, like, how did that work?
I don't remember. I only saw that once. It was I think it was when it first came out, and it was. I didn't watch it all the way through. I don't remember.
I think I recall the younger Bruce Willis character, popping into existence like out of thin air. So that's again
Weird.
kind of a leap in logic there, but
Yeah.
cool prop again, cool visual. Next is the TARDIS from Doctor Who. And we had Josh tell us what the abbreviation meant, and I can't recall it. Let me look it up real quick. Okay, I found it. It's time and relative dimensions in space. Alrighty.
That's so British.
It's so British. That's not even like a normal abbreviation for an object, but okay, yeah, whatever. They wrote it in like the 50s, so you got to give them some grace.
Oh yeah.
So that's the TARDIS, big on the inside.
I like those pocket universes.
Yeah, modeled after an old phone box and phone booth. Next is the DeLorean with the famous flux capacitor from Back to the Future. Love it. 1.1 wait, what was it? 1.21 gigawatts.
Great Scott.
Great Scott, man. So many one-liners from that movie. It just like that first Back to the Future movie is just like a perfect movie.
It really was.
So perfect. I like that they had to get energy source from a different time. That was cool because it needed radioactive, uranium or something.
Yeah, that was difficult. And then he upgraded it, and then you could put in like a can and a banana peel.
Yeah. How do you get energy out of vegetable decomposition equal to that of a radioactive release? Just okay.
Energy and mass transfer, I guess, somehow.
Atomic reaction with a banana.
Yeah.
All right, next is from 12 Monkeys, the TV show. It was called The Chair. Now, I don't remember if they used this or showed it in the movie 12 Monkeys, but in the prequel TV show, they had this really awesome set piece with this cool chair that reclines, and they've got what looks like a particle accelerator behind the person's head and in front of them. And so this huge, epically awesome beam just shoots from one point to the other, and your brain's in the middle, and it sends your brain pattern back in time, I guess, to yourself. No. I think their body disappeared out of the chair. I'm forgetting. It's been a while since I watched the show.
I saw the movie once, and I never saw the TV show.
I want to watch the show again and the movie because it's been like way too long. I'm forgetting the details. So that was a really cool set piece, and that show was really great. A lot of it was a single universe, but you could change history. So like they would go back on a mission, and do something maybe too far, or accidentally do something, and they come back to their present. And central base of operations is totally different. Like everyone's gone, or different commander, or someone's dead. It's really cool. Messing with time. Next is another phone booth from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Wonder where they got that from.
Yeah,
they stole a lot of ideas from people.
Basically, yeah.
And aren't they coming out with another one?
Yeah. Keanu Reeves is banking, man. He is so rich this decade.
And he's not that good of an actor. He's just very stoic, and that's about it.
Just himself. Like it's
he looks cool.
These A-list actors, they're not acting very much. They're acting like themselves, and they're kind of like the same personality for all their movies. But we still love him.
He's kind of like the Bruce Willis of the 2000s.
Yes. Yeah, Bruce Willis, the same thing.
Bruce Willis like 90s, and then now it's Keanu Reeves.
Nicolas Cage, same story with him. Although he's not really an A-list anymore, but he used to be. Next is the Time Stone from Doctor Strange. Love it. Love the Time Stone. I like the Time Stone because you could turn back time for a specific object, like the apple and people.
Yeah. It was very specific. I guess it was up to your consciousness, like you
can control it.
Kind of control it with your mind.
Yeah. Or the magic control rings around your wrist. Maybe there's a little
dials.
Yeah, magical dials.
They brought in like a hand dancer guy specific. I don't know what that style of dance is called, but it's like hand dancing.
Yeah.
And they brought him in specifically to teach all these actors that would be
I love it.
Using the magic how to dance with their hands.
Well, have you seen the magicians? They do the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like Naruto meets Harry Potter.
Naruto.
And man, they are doing some crazy hand stuff just for some stupid spells. And I'm like, this is literally hand dancing. And sure enough.
No, what if you like break your hands?
Yeah. Oh.
Oops, can't spell.
What if you cut off a finger? Can you still do the spells?
Well, there was that old guy in the temple that Doctor Strange went to, and he didn't have hands. But he could still produce the shield because it's not really about your hands, but it's about your mind.
Oh, I forgot.
So I guess that's a way to fix it. So never mind.
Problem solved.
It's not about the hands.
They just like to be fancy.
Well, wasn't in Harry Potter there was magicians that were so powerful they didn't need a wand or they didn't need to say anything.
I read
they
that.
Could just think it.
Mm-hmm. I read that. Yeah. Pretty cool. Because I'm like, really, do you have to say the words? Like,
it's like Pokemon.
If your pronunciation's off, it doesn't work.
Or like Dragon Ball Z, you got to call off the move before you do it. Naruto, same thing.
Hey guys, I'm going to announce my next move. Get ready. All right, here's what I'm going to do next. I sure hope you don't have a comeback move for this.
On the next episode.
Yeah, exactly. All right, a few more. We've got in the old show Quantum Leap, they used the quantum accelerator. And that was before the word quantum was cool.
Yeah, totally. No one knew what that meant.
I feel like about 10 years ago, quantum was like the cool sci-fi word, and there was just so many books and things and techno jargon that was based around the quantum ideas.
I hate that.
Quantum Leap was ahead of its time. That was a great show. I remember we watched it as a kid, didn't we?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, it was pretty cool. I liked it.
It was funny. I love when he went back into women's bodies. That just provided more comedy, even more comedy.
That was really good. Well, and I like the idea that his assistant, his program, was like a digital projection of his assistant that no one could see but him.
Yeah,
I like that.
That was some good comic relief, as well as they had some serious stuff too. Like there was some serious character development.
Yeah,
with who that guy actually was in the future.
Yeah,
cool stuff. All right, last on the list is the time displacement machine from Terminator franchise. And I don't think we ever see the time displacement machine until they had the Genesis movie. Because then you see it.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's super epic.
That was pretty cool. I love that.
It's like this tall vertical column with like, a spherical area in the middle that sends you back and removes your clothes.
Yeah, of course you gotta be naked when you go through.
And you also have to be in a superhero landing stance on one knee every time.
Yes, it's required.
It doesn't work unless you're in that pose.
In the movie Deja Vu, didn't he have to also be naked?
Yeah, he did, yeah.
But he also had a piece of paper on his chest saying, "Revive me."
Oh,
because it stopped his heart when he teleported.
That's cool.
So they teleported him back in the past to a hospital. So he landed on a gurney in the middle of a hospital, and he had that paper on him. Nice. But if it teleports your clothes off, then how can you have that paper with you?
Awesome. Well, that sums up this episode. We thank you for listening, and we'd love to hear from you guys out there. What are your favorite time travel movies, books, comics, whatever? What theory do you think is the correct theory that explains how our universe works if you were to go back or possibly forwards in time? We'd love to hear back from you guys. You can comment on any of the social media posts for this episode, or you can email us at tvvpodcast@gmail.com. And again, thanks for listening, and y'all have a great week. If you like this show, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can also find our previous episodes there and listen whenever you want. We love to hear from our listeners, so if you have any comments or suggestions for future episodes, you can reach us at tvvpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening and have a great week. Or more technically, oh my gosh. Loud motorcycle, waking up all the babies. I'm sure he's real cool.